Hi everyone, and today I'd like to speak about Lou McDonald, the leader of Sinn Féin, who gave an interview on the Late Late Show, RTE's flagship programme, hosted by Kielty. Now, of course, RTE have received €725 million from the public purse over the next 3 years to push the political establishment's narrative. She spoke in the first instance about not winning the general election, and Kielty asked her a question to say, why didn't Sinn Féin win the election? And she said, well, they didn't get enough votes. Isn't that pretty obvious? Really, you couldn't make these questions up. She also said that Sinn Féin will learn lessons from the election, but didn't go into any detail on what those lessons would be. She also spoke about her being leader of Sinn Féin for over 7 years and said that she wants to continue in that role, and she has the full support of her colleagues. Now, Sinn Féin haven't listened to the Irish people for long enough, but again, listen, what do Kielty and his ilk? They won't challenge this narrative with Sinn Féin. She also spoke about upcoming presidential election, and she said that Michael D. Higgins has been a national treasure and has been exemplary. Now, I would beg to differ on Michael D. Higgins because of issues around the introduction of the vaccine passports, which created discrimination and a two-tier society in Ireland. And of course, the presidential role is to sign legislation into law. But of course, he could refer a lot of these bills to the Supreme Court or the Council of State. But Michael D. Higgins didn't. And the only number of times he did raise his head above the parapet regarding housing and perhaps stopping the war in Ukraine and looking for peace, he was quickly put back in his box by the political establishment. So Michael D. Higgins would ride off into the sunset on his big pension and his massive salary. But she said that they haven't come to a decision yet, typical Sinn Féin, on whether they will run a candidate from the Sinn Féin party in the upcoming election or support somebody else. Sinn Féin really don't learn anything. They just completely sit on the fence on so many issues and stand on the side of the establishment in Brussels. She also spoke about Washington DC and why Sinn Féin didn't go to Washington DC. As she said, because of what Trump said about raising Gaza to the ground and creating a real estate empire in Gaza. Now, this is interesting. At the same time, Sinn Féin still turned up to the White House the year before when Genocide Joe was in office. But listen, that's the hypocrisy and talking out of both sides of their mouth. And also she spoke about the Trans Pride March that Sinn Féin were banned from by the activists because of a tweet by the health spokesperson David Cullinan saying that the judgment from the UK Supreme Court regarding the findings around the biological sex of women, that they should be looked at in Ireland. And of course they will be looked at in Ireland, but Lou McDonald said, rode back on it. And again, typical Sinn Féin, rather than standing up and talking the truth, he said they should have a respectful and dignified debate around these issues. But of course, sitting on the fence, yet again, Sinn Féin, see what way the wind blows, and afraid to out any of their woke friends. Now also as well, she spoke at length about Northern and Southern unity, and she said it was the end days of partition, but didn't explain fully what a United Ireland would look like. A United Ireland that's part of the European Union, part of their masters in Brussels, or part of their masters in Davos and their globalist masters. Didn't explain where the funding will come for instance. Never spoke about taxing the wealth, taxing the billionaires, taxing the extreme wealth, capital controls, issues like that. That wasn't spoken about. Issues about poverty weren't spoken about either. And also really just a lot of spin and sort of hot air coming from this interview, in my view, around this move towards this United Ireland. Of course, a lot of people would want United Ireland, led by the people, that's democratic and that puts the needs of its citizens first, not anybody else, such as any supranational federalistic institution such as the European Union and Brussels. And also spoke about the speaking rights as well, and spoke about Michael Lowry, the Lowry-led independence, which I agree with about the Lowry-led independence. We know about Lowry's corruption. I also spoke about the line on the housing figures for the government as well. But this interview was about 35 minutes in length, and at the same time there was no mention of homelessness. Yesterday the record homeless figures came out in Ireland, where 15,500 rather are now in so-called emergency accommodations, which is state-sponsored incarceration facilities, and record amounts of children now are in homelessness. There was no mention of the housing disaster. No mention, of course, of the immigration chaos or a big march that's taking place in Dublin today. No mention of that whatsoever. No mention of just ridiculous, fundamentally. At the same time, no mention of the cost of living disaster, and no mention of Irish neutrality. It just demonstrates a number of factors to myself. Really, Patrick Kielty is just a stooge for the establishment. Fundamentally, any presenter on RTE essentially is just towing the establishment's line. It won't do anything to rock the boat because they're happy getting their salary of whatever Kielty's on, probably 150,000 a year, to fly into Ireland, do a show and fly back out and pretend he knows everything about what's going on a day-to-day basis in Ireland. But this is a narrative being pushed across by the political establishment and by a so-called public service broadcaster, and it's vitally important now more than ever that we have an independent media. We need to hear more independent voices. We need a strong Irish independent media that's free from any political interference or control, and that puts the voices of the people at the top of the agenda and not beholden to big funding that's coming in from the public purse that we're paying for the propaganda that's been rammed down our throat. Absolute nonsense, but that's RTE for you. Complete propagandist. So thanks for the support of my videos. Please press subscribe as well. And let's cut through the spin and nonsense on these interviews, soft interviews that they have with these political leaders on a so-called entertainment show. Thanks for the support. Slán.